the American people free of the threat of physical violence. This resolution should not be controversial. My Republican colleagues often proclaim their support for law enforcement, and so I invite them to co-sponsor this measure, and I would gladly welcome their support. We should be honest about what happened on January the 6th. We should not tell a false history. It was an attack on our country, and it has been captured in video and in pictures. Over 140 officers were injured during that attack. 6 officers died, including a man from South River, New Jersey, Officer Brian Sicknick, and I am pleased to tell you that his mother and his brother are here, and you will hear from him. Officer Sicknick made the ultimate sacrifice. Pardoning his attackers is an assault to his memory, an affront to his family, and is a disgrace to the Constitution that he swore to uphold and gave his life to defend. Just this past weekend, the President directed a purge of veteran prosecutors at the Department of Justice and the FBI, who investigated and secured convictions in the many criminal cases stemming from the heinous attack on January 6th, cases which were brought before the court before a jury of their peers. These are nonpartisan career prosecutors who work to keep us safe. If they were not suddenly the targets of a political takeover of the federal law enforcement, they would be working to stop terrorist attacks, stop drug trafficking and drug dealers, impede human traffickers, and prosecute crime across this country if they were not targeted otherwise. Now those efforts will be weakened. It is not just the president's base who are declaring victory with these purges, but cartels, terrorist cells, and violent extremists. I am so grateful to my colleagues for joining me in introducing this resolution, which is currently endorsed by 125 of our members, for speaking out against the lies and the revisions of one of the darkest days in American history. I'm grateful to the Capitol Police and their families for the sacrifices that they made on that day and every day since to keep us safe. Now I'd like to introduce Ken. Ken Sicknick is Brian's brother, and as I said, who made the ultimate sacrifice. The Sicknicks have lived with the pain of that day for 4 years. Donald Trump's pardon of those involved in Brian's death has reopened that wound. I think it's important to hear from the USCP family about how Trump's pardon has impacted them. And so I'd like to call Ken to the microphone.
Good afternoon. My name is Ken Sicknick. I am United States Capitol Police Officer, Air Force veteran, and American hero, Brian Sicknick's brother. I stand here today 4 years and 2 days since my family laid my brother Brian to rest. Brian died defending the United States Capitol against a mob of thousands that were sent by, who many believe, a fear-mongering narcissist who resides and currently resides at the White House. The mob wielded chemical sprays, tasers, baseball bats, sharpened flagpoles, knives, as well as guns. According to former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Matthew Graves, it was likely the largest single-day mass assault of law enforcement officers in our nation's history. Roughly 140 officers were injured that day. 172 defendants were found to have assaulted the police with deadly or dangerous weapons, including the defendant who assaulted my brother Brian. On January 20th, 2025, a convicted felon and twice impeached politician pardoned approximately 1,600 criminals responsible for the destruction of the property and the destruction of the lives of law enforcement and their families, such as mine. They were all convicted through due process. The investigations were thorough. The rule of law that the FOTUS and his Republican cronies will tell you this stand for was smashed apart. It was smashed apart by the very same person who claimed that he is, quote, a friend of the police more than any president who's ever been in office. While the founders were constructing the Constitution of the United States, there were discussions and debates about presidential pardons. Edmund Randolph of Virginia proposed an exception for cases of treason, and that if the president himself may be guilty, that the traitors he pardons may be his own instruments. George Mason of Virginia objected to pardons because the president would have the unrestrained power of granting pardons for treason, which may be sometimes exercised to screen from punishment those whom he had secretly instigated to commit the crime, and thereby prevent the discovery of his own guilt. Unfortunately, these objections were not heeded, and 236 years later, Mason and Randolph's fears may have come to fruition. The mob that attacked the Capitol and assaulted law enforcement were not persecuted, they were prosecuted. The current White House administration is doing all it can to erase this day from history. They have and continue to present false and misleading statements regarding the facts of what happened leading up to and including that day. There is an attempt to silence any media or politician who may criticize him or point out his responsibility for the events of January 6th. Threatening politicians, some of whom are here today, with prosecution for making public what he did that day. Threatening media outlets with the revocation of their licenses for diverging from what he wants his minions to hear and actually pointing out the truth. The current U.S. Justice Department has deleted its entire January 6th Capitol riot database, which detailed more than 1,500 prosecutions from its website. Removal of senior FBI officials, ham-handedly obtaining a list of thousands of FBI agents who worked on cases related to January 6th. The removal of 17 inspectors general whose jobs are to provide independent checks on agencies to prevent wrongdoing. Make no mistake, the night of the long knives has been resurrected. I will say this to all of law enforcement that still support the FOTUS. When you're being beaten unmercifully by a mob of misinformed thugs, there is a felon in the White House who loves you. To all the criminals out there, just be sure to wear a MAGA hat while you commit your crime, and you're free as a bird because Orange Oprah will give you a pardon too. I will continue to speak out about the injustices I see being done to my family, to Brian's service and memory, and to his brothers and sisters in law enforcement, even though I may feel powerless myself. I will not let the true events of January 6th be forgotten or deliberately erased from history. I quote Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel, "What hurts the victim most is not the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander." Do not let what occurred on January 6th, 2021 be forgotten.
Thank you, Ken. You know, we can all sympathize with the Sicknick family, but we can't empathize with them because we don't know the degree of pain that they've had to address. But having to revisit these issues, having to live through these pardons, just reawakens and reminds them of the pain that they've had to go through. Now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague from Mississippi, the gentleman who has been the chair of the Homeland Security Committee, is now the ranking member, but the gentleman has used his voice as a chairman of the January 6th committee to investigate what happened in this country on that dark day, and has been a strong voice for all of us. Benny Thompson.
Thank you very much. Let me say I join in support of this resolution because it speaks volumes as to who we are as a country. Anytime individuals attack this great capital of ours, anytime they assault law enforcement officers, they need to be called out. What you saw that happened on January 6, 2021, it really happened. It was not patriots. It was not people speaking their First Amendment rights. These were insurrectionists attacking their government. And in this democracy, that should never happen. So we are here in support not only of the resolution, but still letting the Sicknick family know that Brian's death will never, ever be forgotten. More importantly, what you see happening right now should give us all reason for pause. Now the people who did the hard work of tracking these 1,500 people down are now being told you didn't do your job. Now these people either pleaded guilty or they were found guilty. So many of them assaulted law enforcement people, and for now they are being rewarded, and the people who were being patriots are being punished. And so this administration, ought to be ashamed of itself. We will never let what's being done be forgotten. And as Americans, we're better than this. And so because we're better than this, we'll call Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and all his compatriots out and let them know that America is not for sale to the billionaires or the millionaires, because we all love this country. Thank you.
We'd now like to hear from Representative Beyer, who actually was the member who represented Mr. Sicknick when he was working for the Capitol Police. I'd also like to mention, if I might, that we have other members with us here today. Abigail Spanberger from the 5th District in Pennsylvania, and Madeline Dean, who is from the 4th District in Pennsylvania, and Hank Johnson, who is from Georgia 4. And so we're just delighted that we are joined by them. We also have a face you all know, former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn with us. Now, Mr. Beyer.
Thank you, Bonnie, very much. Let me also add that Mary Gay Scanlon from Pennsylvania is with us today also. And Bonnie, thank you so much for your leadership, for introducing this resolution. I want to thank Ken Sicknick for what he said. I express my support for him and the rest of the Sicknick family, Charles and Gladys, Brian's parents, his other brother Craig, Brian's partner Sandra Garza, and all the family. Brian stood for the service, sacrifice, and patriotism for the best of our country, and you have carried on his legacy. I'm proud to have represented Officer Sicknick and many more of the first responders who protected us and our democracy on January 6th. They did so at great personal cost. We all know what happened to Brian. I still remember getting the call to tell me that a constituent had died and learning more about him and what he'd done. It's heartbreaking. So I can never forget or forgive Donald Trump betraying the people by pardoning his attackers. He pardoned the people who attacked Brian, and he pardoned the officers, the people who beat and tased my constituent, Michael Fanone. He pardoned the people who gave a brain injury to my constituent, Jeffrey Smith, who tragically died by suicide days later. It was officially ruled a line of service death. Trump pardoned people who carried out these heinous crimes, which have devastated families across the country. It was not only a gross portrayal of their service and sacrifice, it was an embrace of violence and lawlessness. Trump's pardons make our country less safe and betrayed the law enforcement heroes who protected the Capitol at great personal cost. And now, Trump is attacking and purging the law enforcement who did their jobs by enforcing the law and by investigating and prosecuting this violent crime. I think about Speaker Johnson, who said the people who carried out the January 6th attack should be, quote, prosecuted to the full extent of the law. They were prosecuted, but Trump got them off the hook. And today, Speaker Mike Johnson refuses to honor or acknowledge the police officers who protected him on January 6th. Hundreds of those officers still bear the wounds, seen and unseen, that will never heal, and their families share those wounds. My thoughts today are, as always, with the Sicknicks, with Aaron Smith and her family, and with the families of officers Howie Liebengood, Gunther Hashida, and Kyle DeFreitag. And they're with Mike Fanone. And they're with the many other courageous officers who defended the Capitol on January 6th and their families. The people Trump pardoned are already committing new crimes. We're seeing this almost every day. Donald Trump knows that. And who knows what other crimes they will commit, emboldened by Trump's pardons. Unfortunately, we're all going to find out. Let me now introduce my dear friend and an American treasure, Jamie Raskin.
Get him, Jamie.
Go ahead.
So I'm here to support the resolution to denounce the pardons of every convicted felon who violently assaulted police officers on January the 6th. And I would like to publicly challenge to a debate any of our colleagues who do not support this resolution, Democrat or Republican, in your district. I will come to your district, and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues will join me too, to come and debate whether we should be denouncing and deploring these pardons or we should be backing them and supporting them, either openly or with our silence. Here's where we are in America today. I'm ashamed to say in front of Mrs. Sicknick, Gladys Sicknick, my friend, who's Officer Brian Sicknick's mom, and Ken Sicknick, his brother. Here's where we are. They pardon criminals for violently assaulting cops, and they fire FBI agents and prosecutors for doing their jobs. That's where we are in America today. Brian Sicknick was 42 years old when he died. He'd grown up in New Jersey, the son of wonderful parents, member of a wonderful family. He was a good, strong cop who protected all of us, Democrats and Republicans, citizens who come to visit the Capitol, people who work here in the Capitol. And he was beaten up and sprayed in the face with bear spray and violently assaulted by Julian Cater and other insurrectionists who came to storm the Capitol at the behest of Donald Trump. Brian Sicknick died the next day after suffering 2 strokes at 42 years old. Now, in the immediate aftermath of the attack, as Congressman Don Beyer reminds us, Donald Trump did everything he could to denounce the January 6th insurrectionists. Like Mitch McConnell, like Mike Johnson, like Kevin McCarthy, they all denounced the violence. They said it was un-American. They said it was unpatriotic. They called it terrorism. They did that in the immediate aftermath because of the huge storm of public protest. But Donald Trump steadily began a process of trying to redefine the meaning of the events of January 6th, to whitewash the atrocities that took place that day, to cover up and to shroud in doubt the violent assaults that took place on the police officers, to make people believe that it wasn't Donald Trump's MAGA mob that attacked us, but that it was Antifa, or even more scandalously, the FBI itself. All of them lies. Donald Trump called the people who attacked us and chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," and came to assassinate Nancy Pelosi, patriots. They weren't patriots. The Constitution in 4 different places opposes and condemns insurrection. It says Congress has the power to call forth the militias of the states in order to suppress insurrections in Article 1. And Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which has been read into oblivion by the hacks Donald Trump put on the Supreme Court, says that anybody who swears an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and violates the oath by, quote, engaging in insurrection or rebellion shall never be allowed to hold federal or state office again. If you engage in insurrection, you are not a patriot, you are an enemy of American democracy and our Constitution. He called them hostages, a scandalous insult and offense to people who've actually been held hostage. A hostage is someone who's been illegally abducted by a terrorist or criminal group and held for a financial or political ransom. These people weren't hostages. They were defendants who were arrested and prosecuted for their crimes. And the vast majority of them pled guilty to their crimes. And the rest who went to jail were convicted after having every measure of due process, including the right to counsel, the right to appear in court and to speak publicly if they wanted to. Most of them did not. The right to cross-examine witnesses against you, and the right to hear all the evidence against you. What made them hostages? What made them political prisoners, as Donald Trump called them, likening them to Alexei Navalny, who was killed by Donald Trump's filthy compatriot, Vladimir Putin, in Russia? What makes him like Nelson Mandela, a freedom fighter? But no, they pardoned more than 1,500 of them, including Julian Cater, who pled guilty to 2 counts of assaulting police officers with a dangerous weapon. He was serving a 6-year, 8-month term in the events that led to the death of Officer Brian Sicknick. And now he's freed. More than 1,500 of them have been freed and pardoned by Donald Trump. And meantime, they are engaging in a massive purge of the Department of Justice. Firing prosecutors, firing the prosecutors in the District of Columbia in the U.S. Attorney's Office who prosecuted the January 6th insurrectionists, demanding investigation of thousands of FBI agents across the country who participated in the investigation of this attack on American democracy and the Capitol and the Constitution. So here's where we are, my friends. At the beginning, the first few weeks of the Donald Trump administration, they pardon violent criminal felons who assault police officers, and then they try to purge, fire, dismiss prosecutors and FBI agents for doing their jobs. And a lot of them Republicans, by the way. So what's the message? Don't participate in the prosecution of any crimes that you might think Donald Trump approves of. Don't get caught enforcing the law in a way Donald Trump might not approve of. That's where we are right now in 2025. But I want to say all across America, it's not just this brave family, the Sicknicks. All across America, people are standing up against these outrageous assaults on the American rule of law and on our Constitution. And like Don Beyer and like the Sicknicks, I'm keeping Officer Brian Sicknick right in my heart when I go out and I protest these injustices and these savage attacks on our constitutional order. And I guess I turn it
and that people of this country have got to stand up against it. So we are now willing to take